Linda Cook.
Joined the meeting.
Oh boy.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Melissa.
How's it going?
Good. Getting any sleep, Roger?
Yeah, actually, like he's
Oh,
been,
good.
yeah,
Oh, good.
he's been
That's good.
good.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah,
That's
he's
great.
sleeping right now, actually, ironically.
Uh-huh.
But he's good.
Good.
Sleeps from like 1 to 7, I think, which is like the allowable max before.
Oh
dose.
yeah, 1 to 7 is that's elegant.
Yes, I know.
Elegant.
So thankful.
What is the name again?
His name is Booker.
Booker?
Nice.
Yes.
Okay,
Beautiful.
thank you.
Hello, everybody. Hey, Melissa, it looks like we've got a quorum.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks, everyone, for joining tonight. And happy Hanukkah to those who are celebrating. I'm hoping that maybe we can get the meeting done a little earlier so we can, still have time to celebrate. But on that note, can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Jackie, can I get a second?
Second.
Thanks, Brian. All in favor?
Aye.
Hey, Melissa,
Is there any discussion? Any
Hey,
discussion?
Melissa, can we do it? First of all, yeah, probably discussion and then the roll call thing like last time.
Okay.
Sorry.
Jeff, I think you were muted. Were you going to ask for discussion?
Yes.
Okay. Does anyone have any discussion on the agenda? Jeff.
Yeah, so under meeting objectives, when we talk about updating the 2005 wastewater study, I don't recall that conversation ever. When did that occur?
Well, it was suggested as an agenda topic at the last meeting. And I mean, I think we have talked about the 2005 wastewater study off and on. It's been brought up during our meetings for a significant amount of time.
That doesn't answer my question.
Okay.
So fundamentally, I understand that the Planning Commission is promoting a wastewater study. I have never been a part of the Planning Commission's discussion that talked about the updating the 2005 wastewater study.
Well, I think that was,
Those are very different things.
I think that's part of what we are going to discuss. I don't think we've had extensive discussions on this before, and I think that's why it's on the agenda.
Okay, I'll vote no on the agenda. That's fine. I'm only one member.
Okay.
Forget the rest of my comments because I don't matter.
Okay, okay. Jackie, did you have something
Yeah,
to say?
I just want to clarify a few things. Number one, one of our action items from the town plan that was approved and adopted in March and April, is to update the 2005 wastewater study. So that it's an actual action item for the Planning Commission in the town plan. We've worked on it over the summer, and then at a recent select board meeting this fall, the select board was looking for our guidance on what to do. We kind of pushed it back to them or up to them, I should say, when we got sidelined this summer. And then they have asked for our guidance. So I suggested that this be an agenda topic at our last meeting, and it was in the minutes and it's on the agenda. So I just wanted to clarify that point.
Thank you, Jackie, and thank you for keeping track of those town plan action items.
Right.
Jeff Goodrich, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, no.
Is that
I disagree with everything Jackie said. So fundamentally, even if the town plan suggests updating the 2005 study, that's not the question at hand. So the planning commission has talked about engaging in a wastewater study that has not contemplated. Rod put some stuff together with respect to a study. It's not the same as updating the 2005 study. So I want to unconflate all of this stuff.
Okay. Anyone else? Any other discussion? Are we ready to vote on whether to approve the agenda?
This is Jeff. I'm sorry. Can I just make a quick question? So
Sure.
My understanding is that we're talking about, like, we agreed that we needed to talk about what we needed to do next, right?
Right.
In terms of sewer and study, whether it's an update of the 2005 study or something else, I think is yet to be determined. I know that's an action item, but it's a subtle distinction, but I think the point is, this is the first time we've had a chance to really talk about what it is that we want to do, right? To follow up. And so I think we should just have that conversation, right? Like, what do we want to do? It's not fundamentally different, Jackie, I think, from what you're suggesting. I'm just saying,
Right.
rather than sort of preordain the outcome, in the topic area, let's just say the topic area is to talk about what, if anything, we want to do about a sewer study, and then
It's fine. That's fine.
that work?
That's fine. No argument. No argument. I was just repeating the words that are in the plan. That's all.
Okay. Any more discussion? All right. Jackie Allen, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Brian Loeb, how do you vote?
Also, yes.
Leah Romano, how do you vote?
Yes.
Jeff Goodrich, how do you vote?
Nay.
Jeff LaBelle, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Melissa Horowitz, yes. Okay, so our meeting objectives for this evening are to talk about the wastewater study and what we're going to do and what we're going to recommend or provide feedback to the select board. I believe Jeff LaBelle is going to give us an update from the Affordable Housing Committee on Prudential Committee land recommendations and plan to develop educational materials that address frequently asked questions about affordable housing in Norwich. And finally, we're going to discuss process and policies for the Planning Commission moving forward. Are there any comments from the public? Brian?
I didn't feel the need to amend the agenda, but in other business, I could update everyone on the first meeting of the Child Care Committee.
Okay. Is everyone okay with that? Do we need to amend the agenda? Okay. Great. Thanks, Brian. Any comments from the public?
Just one thing, Claudette has her hand up. Melissa. you
Oh,
might-
sorry, I can't see it.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Well, thanks for letting me know. Claudette?
Hi, I'm putting on my select board chair hat now. Just to comment that Jeff Goodrich, you have a great deal of knowledge to share with the town and the Planning Commission. What I'm finding objectionable is how you're sharing that information. Seems you're constantly interrupting the chair. I find your approach to be extremely aggressive, argumentative, misogynistic. And I just want to let you know that as the chair of the select board, and the select board having appointment authority that I find it very disturbing. And I just want to let you know.
Thanks, Claudette. Jeff, did you?
Yeah, so as the local, as the poor person who grew up here, all I can say to Claudette is, I find your conduct racist, misogynistic, and all those other things that you're saying. So when someone threatens me, so when someone says I'm going to violate the law, from my standpoint, regardless of my professional standing, it seems like I ought to stand up for the law. I get interrupted all the time. I get talked over all the time. I've been treated terribly since Jack Allen took over his chair. What do you want me to do? So I'm sorry, Claudette. I just don't accept the racist comments you're making.
Jeff, maybe it's time you step aside for a little bit.
Likewise, sister. Likewise. As someone who cares about this community for my entire life. Misogynistic, really?
Yes.
Racist,
Believe so.
really?
Yes. To me, it is.
Yeah, to me it is. You are misogynistic and racist, Claudette. Likewise, I back at you. So maybe you ought to step aside.
Jeff,
Claudette.
as the select board chair, we have the authority to remove you from the planning commission.
I agree, you do.
And I would appreciate if your approach is just a little bit more
Thank you, thank you. Thank you.
helpful versus argumentative and aggressive.
Claudette, if I agree
That's all
with
I'm
you.
going to say, Jeff. I'm not going to take over your committee. This is it. Thank you.
Any other
I
public
don't know how
comment?
to put my hand down. My
Oh,
blue
I can-
hand down.
I can do that.
Thank you.
Any other public comments? Linda, Roger? Okay.
No.
Hearing none, we can move on to review.
Roger was about to make a statement.
Oh, I'm sorry, Roger. Go ahead.
No, I've had the benefit of reviewing some of your meetings and attending some of your meetings, and I would like to just, co-sign. We're speaking as individual members of a governing body that has the authority to make appointments, and so from this individual member, I've had the benefit of watching your meetings, and I co-sign much of what Claudette said, and I admire her for presenting it so diplomatically. I would have made much more pointed words. So thank you to Claudette, and I hope it was heard. And again, that is all that I wanted to say. So yes, I've had the benefit of watching your meetings and attending some of your meetings, and I find the decorum deplorable, particularly at Jeff Goodrich, and I just wanted you to know that. And I've had members of my community write to me about this. This isn't these members on this screen who reached out to me. It's people who've also watched these tapes. So, I just wanted to say that. So I co-sign it, and I will step aside. This isn't meant to be anything other than just a public comment and reminding everyone of that we're responsible for making these appointments, and that we will take that responsibility seriously for all committees.
Thank you, Roger. Jeff?
Yeah, so Melissa, I've had a whole bunch of folks in the community reach out to me as well, encouraging me to support open meeting law concerns.
Okay.
Folks like Stuart, folks like Ernie, others, etc. Also, they've encouraged me to oppose the lack of decorum that we faced in the last couple of years.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff. Anyone else? Or are we good to move on to the minutes from November 12th? Can I get a motion to approve the minutes? Jackie, thank you.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Brian. Any discussion? Leah?
Just feedback. I noticed, I think it's on the last page with reference to Stuart Richards' comment. I think there was a typo in the word not. I think it was typed as knit. So I mean, it's just a typo, but I think it's important that it's corrected because he was referring something that we did or did not do.
Thank you.
Great. Did you get that, Rod?
Yep.
Cool. Jeff Goodrich?
Yeah, several comments. So under 6, paragraph 1, 2, 3, there's another typo. It's minor. Stuart Richards asked who was forming the committee and who was on it. Chair Horowitz responded that there was select board member. It should be a select board member.
Okay.
On the next page, item 7, 1, 2, 3 down says Goodrich agreed there was, stating that he was deeply concerned about the way the commissioners conducts business. My notes suggested Goodrich and Ciccatelli agreed. I have more to add.
Yeah, I can't comment on that one. I don't remember specifically, and Ernie's not here. What is your next
So
addition?
the next, so a couple paragraphs down where it says wide-ranging discussion included following points. There are a bunch of bullets. So our minutes have not reflected this kind of detail, and I would like to omit that entire section. Moving on, comments. Under item 12, Stuart Richards commented that people can disagree without being disagreeable. It says I submitted. I'm not sure I understand the pronoun there. And then the next sentence says, when you get to revisions, this is an odd, so if Rod's trying to attempt to quote Stuart, I would suggest something about quoting Stuart, if you will. And Leah already hit the knit versus not. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Well, we have a Leah, go ahead.
I just want to say, I agree with on the last page, section 12, the comments from the public regarding Stuart Richards. I agree that the comment about if we're quoting Stuart, let's put it in quotes, wasn't sure. But let's be clear about that part.
Okay, that's okay. I got it.
Okay.
You
Anyone
might-
else?
Yeah, just
Jeff?
a small thing. You know, since it's very hard to remember people's exact words, rather than quoting it, you might want to say, he said.
Yeah, that's what I just, that's what I just said. That's okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
well, before we move off the topic of approving the minutes, Jeff asked that, was it that all the bullet items be eliminated?
Yeah, it says wide-ranging discussion included the following points. There was way more than that in some ways, and I'm not sure this was included in some ways. And I'm not sure we've done this ever.
Okay, well, the only remark I'd make here is that I asked for direction on how to capture this item in the minutes. And I believe this is a good faith effort at doing that. And so what I was asked to do was to pick out the key themes, which I believe I've done. And so they're your minutes to approve or to amend as you see fit. But just explaining that they were the instructions that I asked for instructions, I got the instructions, and I followed the instructions. So if you, as a group, want to eliminate it, that's fine. Just let me know.
Okay. And go ahead, Leah.
Just add some discussion from what I recall from the last meeting. The recommendation was to, in discussions like this, to have a header like discussion included various points, and then we can choose what points to make. And I know this is an attempt at doing that and looking at what we want to be reflected moving forward. I personally think it's okay. I also am not as familiar with what would be better, whether it's omit it and just leave it as various discussion, or document the points. But as you can see from the bullet points, some object to another. And in other meetings I've been at, you could say discussion about whether yes or no, rather than one point for it at the top and then against it at the bottom. So it's just discussion among the planning commission of how we want, how we agree on moving forward with such documentation.
Does anyone else have any discussion to weigh in on that?
I can see the merits of both arguments, to be honest. It is certainly true that it's only a small portion of what was said and it's not a complete record. It also gives the public a flavor of the kinds of things that were said. I think if we keep it, we probably need to be clearer that it wasn't like everybody was in agreement on these points, because these really points reflect different points of view. So you could say some of the points articulated by individual members included, I think would be a better way to introduce the list than this one, which the way it's currently labeled, which leaves open the possibility that somehow we all agreed with everything, which we certainly didn't, because some of those things contradict each other.
Okay. We have a motion pending. Do we want to amend the motion to make the amendments to the notes?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it since I moved to approve. There were a couple of corrections to Stuart's comments on number 12. That we could include those, and then I like Jeff's idea of clarifying the comments on item 7.
Oh, great, thanks. A second?
I second.
I think Brian seconded it already. Is that right?
Does he want to resecond? The motion has
Do you
been.
want to
I guess the question is more, are you okay with that Jackie's friendly amendment to her own motion?
Right.
All right.
Yes, I will resecond.
You're still friendly with Jackie? That's good.
He didn't say that. He just said he.
I didn't say that.
All right. Okay.
In general, I
Well,
think it
we're
was a
going to work
good
on that
faith
later.
effort.
Okay.
In general, I think it was a good faith effort to capture the spirit of the discussion in light of our discussion about how comprehensive the minutes should be. That said, I'm fine with the suggestions that have been made.
Thank you. Jackie, how do you vote?
Yes.
Brian, how do you vote? I think I got
Yes.
the gist. Jeff LaBelle, how do you vote?
Yes.
Jeff Goodrich, how do you vote?
Nay.
Leah Romano, how do you vote?
Yes.
Melissa Horowitz, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, now we're on announcements, reports, updates, and correspondence. I think, Rod, you had an update.
Yes. So I just quickly, I don't believe we received any correspondence, and I have 2 brief updates. I've learned late this morning that our municipal planning grant application for studying the density factor in the subdivision regulations was approved with full funding.
Yeah.
And so we'll be able to
Fantastic.
commence that early in.
Congratulations. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
That's great.
And then the other thing is that people had asked, I guess, both on the commission and other places for access to the Zoom recordings. And so I have loaded up all the Zoom recordings that we have, which is not exactly all the planning commission meetings that we've held since the beginning of COVID. There were a couple of technical fails, I think, at some point early on that still remain a mystery. But nevertheless, the majority of the meetings that we've had, I have Zoom videos for. And there is a link to the YouTube page. So the town now has a wildly popular YouTube channel. I think we're in competition with Norwich, Connecticut. We're probably seeing them often. So that's always good. And not to mention Norwich, England, and they don't even say it that way. And so anyway, so all the Planning Commission videos are available on the YouTube channel. The link to the YouTube channel is now at the top of the Planning Commission webpage on the town website. So you should be able to steer there on your phone when you've got nothing else to do. Okay, so that's it for me.
Great, thanks, Rod.
welcome.
Brian, would this be a good time to provide an update on the Child Care Committee?
Sure. Thanks, Melissa. We had our first meeting earlier in the week. We had the few members who have been formally appointed so far, as well as Mary from the Select Board. We approved a temporary chair for the meeting in Rebecca Holcomb until we have additional members appointed for our next meeting, at which point we'll officially elect officers. I'd say we had a pretty wide-ranging discussion about the task as we understand it in light of the Select Board's formal charge to the group. We reflected on some of the research that went into the section in the town plan, and we all agreed to put together a bit of a background reading list to send out prior to the next meeting, and that reading list has now gone out. It includes not only the section in the town plan, but also the list of interviewees that we used, as well as the notes from our public forum on childcare that we held in preparation for the town plan, and some other reading materials prepared by Rebecca and Mary. We've since reached out to a couple other folks involved in that past research, and are kind of otherwise preparing to hold the next meeting of the committee, which has not, as far as I know, been scheduled yet. That's about all there is to say. Now people are really excited to do something. I think their vision of success ranges from the small to the grandiose. I hope we can do important things, because as the town plan documents, there are real barriers to affordable and high quality childcare really across the income spectrum in town. And I hope we can do something meaningful and make meaningful recommendations. One point to note is in the Select Board's formal charge, it sets a deadline for February for some kind of progress. But I think the members of the committee so far view that deadline, and maybe Roger and Claudette might have their own thoughts on this, but I think as a group, we interpreted that as a date at which we need to show progress and report, but it wouldn't necessarily be the time at which that committee ends its useful life. So that's kind of what we're working with. We should be scheduling the next meeting soon.
Good.
Great. Thanks for the update, Brian, and thanks for the work you're doing. That sounds
Thank
great.
you.
Melissa,
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I just have two things under updates.
Oh,
One is,
sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I wanted to say thank you to Brian and Jeff LaBelle and there others who worked on the piece that appeared in the Valley News on the housing. I thought that was excellent. And I also wanted to ask Rod about the status of the Village Center designation. I think we might have been hearing something about that soon. I just wanted to know if you heard.
Oh, we
Yeah.
got it.
Okay.
Yeah, we got it. We're good.
And we're not celebrating?
Oh.
It was like 4 years in the making, Rod. That's been 4 years in the making. My gosh.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm not good at that part. So yeah, no, we got it.
Great.
Jackie, how would you propose celebrating?
Well, you have a point. I'll keep drinking my water.
Go down and wins. Yeah.
Herb, you had your hand up?
So just to further that, just so you'll know, the value of what you guys allowed to move forward is that Dan and Witz is being required to put a sprinkler system in their building. And by having the village center designation, they can probably get half of that sprinkler system paid for by the tax credits. So
Wonderful.
that's really expensive. So just giving you the heads up on a goodwill story resulting from good work.
That's great.
That's great. Jeff Goodrich?
Yeah, to me, the village designation was perfunctory. Select board decided not to approve the town plan, so we didn't have the designation. Now that we have the town plan, we have the designation. I was excited years ago about the designation. I'm excited today about the designation, and I'm glad that select board has adopted a town plan that allows that.
Great, thank you. All right, any more comments, or do we want to move on to wastewater? All right,
Let's move on.
so wastewater, what are our
Hey,
next?
Well, Melissa, I have a question. I saw
Jeff.
Roger wagging his head after I made some remarks. So how about decorum? I don't know
Okay.
if Roger was offended by what I said. I'm excited about the village designation. If he just doesn't like me, try not to wag your head.
Oh no, there's a baby in the background, Jeff. But I'm happy to address that if the chair would like, but I don't need to.
I mean, I'd like to see the baby, but
Yeah, me too.
sorry.
Thank you.
Thanks, Roger.
I'm a little sensitive after the remarks that were made, so thank you.
Great. All right. Well, on a happier topic, wastewater.
Yeah.
So anyone want to get us started, Jackie?
Yeah, I would like to start us because I suggested that this be on the agenda. And as I mentioned, it is a follow-up action for us in the town plan. And I know, once again, you all remember we tried to take a stab at a scoping document to apply for a grant to get a study done. And then ultimately, we made the decision to apply for the grant that we just received. There was one grant that we could apply for, and now we have received that grant, and that's great. And that's to do some pre-work before we get into zoning. What I think, though, the problem at hand we have is, as we know, our school system septic has failed, and they've been looking at solutions for some time now, trying to make a decision. Difficult, to say the least, in the age of COVID and everything else. But I think it behooves us as a planning commission, and we've been encouraged by the select board to make some recommendation in terms of what is the town's role in all of this. And the analogy I'm going to provide here is, suppose for my house, the decking, suppose I had a big deck and the decking is failing. I wouldn't go out and replace the decking, without also looking under the deck and making sure maybe I need to replace the foundation. And I think we have I don't know if it's an exact analogy, but what's going on with our town right now is a need to make a good decision related to our school, a longer term decision related to our school waste. We should be making that decision, ideally would be made by looking at the whole picture of our town. And is there anything else that we should be considered as the school makes that decision? So in order to get that rolling, the concept when we worked on the town plan was that, let's just gather the facts. What is the wastewater situation in town? How has it changed in the 15 years since the 2005 study was done? Has anything changed? And so, the question for us as a group, what are our options? And I think Rod can give us some advice here in terms of grant money or not grant money available. I think the answer is not. But what are some alternatives that he might suggest that we could look at? I'd also like to think that, let's keep it simple. I think one of the key concerns should be, has to do with health and safety of our village. Is the water table safe? Is there any public health issue based on the condition of the septic systems in the town? And I think, the other question has to do with the businesses in town and how well they can thrive or survive, if we're to maintain the status quo. I think those are the key issues from the town perspective. Others can weigh in, please, if you see other priorities. But that might be a way to keep it simple. We could we could zero in on those specific questions. That might help us come up with an approach that's doable, or just a recommendation to the select board on next steps.
Thanks, Jackie.
Mhm.
Jeff, did you have your hand up, Goodrich?
No, but I'm glad to offer thoughts.
Well, I won't force you. I just thought I saw your hand up.
So to me, the school issue is again, try not to conflate issues. And to the extent I need to step down because I represent the school district, there's a question about what the school's needs are, and I'm glad to talk about that and what the implications for the town are. If you want to explore that, I'm glad to be a part of a discussion that actually explores those exclusively.
Jeff LaBelle?
Yeah, I don't know. Let's put it this way. I'm still in the process of thinking this through, so I don't have answers, but I do have some thoughts and some questions. So one thing is, it seems to me that while the school is on a little bit slower timeline than they were previously, I think it would be an historic mistake to not be in a position to line up the town's needs with the school's needs and try to take advantage of what, any connection that the school might seek to make to a neighboring town. This kind of thing only comes around once every 20 or 30 years. And to sort of not be in a position to act, because we can't get our act together, would be very problematic. And so again, it's really important, I think, to understand the school's timeline and what options they're thinking about. And we did have Tom come and speak to us at a recent meeting, so I understand that we're trying, but I would encourage the select board as well to reach out to the school and really be in concert, because this is not a decision to be made lightly, right? If the school decides to connect to Hartford and they have to decide between putting in a 2-inch pipe or a 4-inch pipe, and because we can't give them an answer, they just do a 2-inch pipe. We've just missed what could be a huge opportunity, and it's not going to come around for a long time. Now, whether it is, we may decide that we don't want to connect to a neighboring town, but you know what I mean? So I do think it's important that whatever we do, we try to do it in a really timely way, and it's really accelerated and fast so that we're in that position. So that's one issue I just wanted to flag. The second is this issue of, whether we should be already reaching out to the town to the town of Hartford to better understand sort of their position and the potential to link up to their septic system, just to get a read on what's possible. It sounds like the school ran into some obstacles, right? They initially reached out to to Hartford. They got a positive response. They were moving forward with their planning, and then they got a response saying we have to study it further. I don't think, to my knowledge, the town of Norwich has reached out to the town of Hartford to sort of talk about this at all. And there are a lot of issues. So one is, what is the capacity of Hartford to expand? And if there's a cost associated, what are those costs? There's also the question of whether there should be an intermunicipal agreement between the town of Norwich and the town of Hartford to handle what happens in the event that, there are already several businesses in Norwich that have connected to Hartford's sewer system, and there's no intermunicipal agreement, right? And so Norwich has no standing whatsoever to, play any role in that. So I think there's a lot of open questions, and some of them probably will need to be done town to town. So I'm just wondering, could we set up a process that would enable us to be in a position to have some answers quickly? And what would that process look like? I have some thoughts, but what I don't want to do is commission a 3-year study and then miss this moment.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Jeff, other Jeff?
Yeah, in terms of process, I don't want to speak for the select board or town staff. It's simply not how I think. But my perception is that folks on our select board have engaged folks on Hartford select board, and folks on our staff have engaged folks on Hartford staff. The historical record for Hartford is that Hartford has accepted connections, not the least of which is the Family Place, UCC, and historically said we have ample capacity for what Marion Cross School and or the businesses along Route 5 may accept. And we're talking about something like 15,000 gallons per day. You all can look up the capacity of the Hartford system online. It's enormous, and this is fine. It's really a function of the political construct of the day and the town manager of the day. In this particular situation, what I'd like to do is address process. So if hypothetically, if Marion Cross School wants to approach the state of Vermont for funding for a municipal interconnection, it has to go through probably a year-long process, which I can spend a long time talking about environmental issues, findings of no significant impact, sizing, the transportation department, et cetera, in consideration of all of the things that may have to happen to make that connection possible. That all needs to happen, if I may, and I'm advocating for the school district at this point, without regard to what the Village of Norwich may add. If the district's process occurs and the town of Norwich says we want to add on to that, the district has basically laid the groundwork, except for the pipe diameter question that Jeff Lubell just addressed. Now, the reverse scenario is if the district doesn't proceed with engaging the state of Vermont, we're a year out from the possibility of considering a connection. So what I'd like to add, and by the way, please, any member of the Planning Commission, tell me if you think I should recuse. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
You are breaking up. I just wanted to let you know, I could still make out most of what you're saying, but you're kind of going in and out your Zoom.
And Jeff,
Jack-
I'm glad you brought up the issue of recusal. I really appreciate that very much. And I'd like us to consider that before we go any further. I think that's an important question, and so that you can excuse yourself gracefully if needed. And I guess, a second comment I have is I don't want to get the cart before the horse here. I don't want to like immediately go to this idea of a sewer connection, because I still feel like, we should, I'd still like to know what the current state is in the town. And I don't think we know that. Are there health and safety concerns? I think we know there are business constraints, how serious are those business constraints, but are there health and safety concerns? And I would like to know that before we start thinking that we need to hook up to a sewer. I don't, and the idea of community systems are there in place now in our town, and maybe we want to expand on that concept. So I really want us to be thinking about alternatives based on the facts of what the current situation is. And I don't have those facts in hand, the current situation. But let's talk about the recusal process though too, okay? Thanks.
Jeff, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about the facts.
Okay. Jeff Lubell.
With respect to recusal, I mean, if we're not making a decision, but we're just having a conversation, is there still a recusal issue? Like, I wonder if we could just sort of suggest that we're able to continue the conversation, and then if there is a vote that we need to take, then we can make a decision at that point.
Brian Loeb.
Yeah, I'm of the same opinion. We all have particular knowledge gained in our professional life or personal life, and that's what we bring here. If Jeff Goodrich feels like he's in a position where he has conflicting interests, or if he's not able to divulge information that would be beneficial to us, I would hope that he would tell us, and I would trust him to do so. And then we can try as a group to find alternate avenues to gather that information. But we're not making any decisions here.
Okay. Any other comments, Leah?
I would just add, in addition to what people have been saying about discussion and gathering facts and gathering data, is if there's some format where we can have that data, whether it's just on a spreadsheet or something, so that we are not forced to remember from someone's anecdote and a recording. If we can process like, well, the answer to this question is this, or it could go this way or that way. I know it seems pretty simple, but since we're still arguing on things like details in the minutes, I think it will be important as we move forward with an important discussion like this, that we document in some capacity the information we're gathering and sharing with one another.
Okay. And Jackie, did you have a vision of how this research would be done? Is this something in conjunction with the select board or something that the planning commission would initiate?
I guess I would look to them for agreement on it. I think one of the questions is funding. I think we would need some funding for this. And one avenue I thought after rereading the 2005 study is, we could pick out sections of that and ask for them to be updated by an outside expert. Rod may have some other, I'm sure has some other views on how this might get done more, most efficiently, just to answer some basic questions so that, we understand where does the town fit in this school discussion? How does the town, are we completely disinterested in it? Probably not. Where do we fit in that discussion?
Okay.
I think the report I'd be looking for could help us answer that question.
Great. Rod, I think I saw your hand up next.
Hello, everyone. So I'm reluctant to sort of get into too much detail because we went through this before at the point where we needed to make a decision about what kind of a project to submit for getting support for the through the municipal planning grant program. And the planning commission made a choice, and the choice was to go with the density bonus question, or the density calculator question from the subdivision regulations, and set aside the question of wastewater at that point. If my recollection serves me correctly, it was because people felt that the timeline that I outlined for doing a funded update of the wastewater study, or a funded wastewater study, regardless of whether you pick up the 2005 study or start over, was not compatible with commissioners' sense of the urgency of resolving the Marion Cross school problem and the potential for them to connect. Again, that was pre-COVID, and the circumstances are somewhat changed. We've learned a few things in the intervening months. One is that the school, which is, I'm not actually sure whether the school's operating on site or not at this point, or for how long it will. But the school administration made a policy decision to commence pumping in the winter, the same way that Tracy Hall deals with its wastewater problem, and then truck it to, as it turns out, Hartford, where Hartford accepts it for a fee and processes it. So to cut to the chase on the funding question, now because we are a designated village center again, we get minor preferential treatment before the Department of Environmental Conservation for pursuing a wastewater study. And the way that program operates, and Jeff Goodrich, I'm sure, has experience with this, it's the same as the Marion Cross requirement. It would take about 12 months because of the technical complexity of what's involved. And it would be highly technical in nature. The way that program is structured is, if you sign on to the notion that you're going to want to do something with make an infrastructure decision to resolve wastewater, the funds advanced to the community to undertake the study are a grant. If you do the study and then you get to the end of the study and you conclude that you don't want to do anything about it, then you got to pay for it, is my understanding. So it kind of loads the outcome pretty heavily in the beginning, and it also, for obvious reasons, to do with that fork in the road, you need to have a much clearer sense about what the community really would prefer to do, maybe before you start that, right? So, which could include, oh, look, we just don't, as a community, we don't want to make a premature decision. We'll be perfectly comfortable with the possible outcome that when we get to the end of the study and we're presented with our options, we will conclude that doing nothing is the best option, or at least not pursuing an infrastructure solution to our problem is the best solution for us. So I've tried before, back in September, to make this as clear as possible. What I'd say is, in my work with other communities where they've been pretty determined that the solution for them, for whatever reason, is to actually have an infrastructure solution. In other words, want to buy into establishing a wastewater treatment plant or increasing the capacity of an existing wastewater treatment plant, that program that DEC runs works for them because they're already pretty convinced that that's the path that they want to go on. I'm not saying, I don't have a sense of where Norwich as a community is at with this. And I'm not saying that the urgency of the school problem isn't important to follow through on. All I'm trying to do here is really lay out the way the program works. And it is necessarily long and tedious. All I can say is that I'm sure you could get the same information gathered and analyzed by from a number of different places, but you'd have to pay for it yourself, and know that you're going to pay for it yourself. And then at the point where the community was confronting a decision as to whether to hook up to another community system or build its own, or whatever the preferred solution is, the state would not necessarily, I think, grant you sort of preferential treatment. So the program that I'm talking about that comes with the possibility of a free study is if you implement an infrastructure solution and you use the state funding mechanism to get a low interest loan to build the infrastructure solution that the study showed would best suit the community. So it's not a very satisfactory answer to your problem, and it doesn't deal with how do people feel about whether they'd like a municipal wastewater system or not, or how do people feel about connecting to another community's wastewater system. And it doesn't necessarily address the lot by lot or parcel by parcel health and safety affairs of the existing setting, is my understanding. So I hope that, I know that doesn't really clarify things for you, but I'm trying to just lay out how the funding situation in Vermont works, which is actually not that helpful for a community like Norwich.
Thanks, Rod. Jeff LaBelle?
Yeah, so I that was really helpful, Rod. To me, it outlines what, I think the reason we made the decision, if I remember back in September, was not just about timeline. It was really about what our needs were. And so we were not ready to say, we know we want a system, tell us the right system and get it through the permitting process. We're at the point where we want to know what are the pros and cons of having a wastewater system or connecting to a wastewater system. What are the costs going to be? What are the options? Is there really a need for this? Is there a demand for this? I mean, so getting a sense of, is there a customer base downtown, and what does that customer base look like? It seems to me, and then getting a sense of what the town's concerns would be and what the I think if fleshing that out would help us figure out whether we want to go through with that kind of long process, but we're not quite ready to do that. And I just wonder whether there's some way that we could do that pre-decision process in a relatively compressed period of time, in a way that still gives people an opportunity for input, but helps to clarify kind of whether this is a path that we want to pursue. And then if we do, hopefully we'll be lined up with the town, the school, and we can pursue a path together. But if we reach that at the end, as Jackie says, maybe we'll come to the conclusion that we don't want a wastewater system, or that, a community septic system would work better for whatever our needs are. I hope we can make that decision pretty quickly, though.
Thanks, Jeff. Jeff Goodrich.
Yeah, and Melissa, to the extent I cut out, please let me know. It's Wi-Fi in Norwich, so
We all feel it.
yeah, I'm sorry. But as a member of the 2005 report sewer committee, to me, the bottom line of that analysis was, what does the town of Norwich have to do? How much is it going to cost, et cetera? We're not in the same place with respect to the Marion Cross School concerns. So if Marion Cross School can partner with businesses along Route 5 to find a way to fund the corridor, fund a connection to Hartford, which has ample capacity, and I'm saying that as an expert. This is what I do. Towns hire me, people hire me to do this. I'm not judging Hartford, I'm not judging Norwich. The broader issue is, this is my perception. Call me all the names you want. This is my perception. The town hall project, the energy project, was not voted favorably last time. Concerns about Marion Cross School were sort of at the forefront. I'm not advocating this or that, but the select board has demonstrated to me a desire to address fiscal considerations for a variety of reasons. And I applaud the select board for that. We're in a budget season. The select board's trying to balance things. So what is it we really need to do, and how do we pay for all this? So what I just want to lay out is, without intending to countermand anything Rod said, the Norwich School District has an opportunity to engage businesses along Route 5 to embark on an analysis process. Norwich, which, as Rod said, or as Rod agreed, is going to take about a year, ballpark. I think the town of Norwich has time to say whether Norwich wants to upgrade the pipe from whatever, whether it's 2 inches, Jeff said, or 3 inch or 4 inch, whatever, to some other diameter. There's time for that. So the broader question is, and I want to come back to Marion Cross School. Marion Cross School, it's a touchy issue because technically it's not in failure. The system is not in failure in warm weather. When stuff breaks out on the surface, it seems to be February, March. The state has not issued a zoning violation or a health violation. The broader issue is that in the winter months, the frost that occurs on the green warrants consideration of another alternative. All of that said, looking at a variety of parcels in Norwich, what's the community solution? If it's for Marion Cross School only, maybe there is a solution, I don't know. If it's more than Marion Cross School, the soils in Norwich, from my perspective, and I'm speaking as a professional that does this all the time, community solution is highly unlikely. That doesn't mean that Norwich has to upsize the pipe, has to do any more growth, has to do anything more than that. The broader issue for Marion Cross School, I think, is, do they embark on this process of analysis with the state, that year-long process? Does the town want to engage in consideration of an analysis in that year that maybe upsizes the pipe? I think those are the issues on the table right now with respect to our budget concerns.
Thanks, Jeff. I mean, I guess where do we go from here? I mean, what should our plan of attack be? Brian?
Sure. I guess there's a question for Rod, what the cycle of the technical study is, and when you need an affirmative to get it started when, that would be helpful to know. Like if we say yes tonight, that's not happening, but so we say, there was a motion to say yes tonight. Does it start in 6 months? Does it start tomorrow? Does it start in 2 years? What is the real timeline for this technical study? But the larger thing that I think Jackie and both Jeffs are getting at is this doesn't have to be the only mechanism for understanding what the town wants to do, right? It's a quite technical study as you've described it, as Jeff Goodrich has described it. But there are ways to get at the kind of strategic community decisions that need to be made regardless of the outcome of the technical study. And I think we have the opportunity to shape what that research could and should look like. And that, that it's not something that we need to decide tonight, but this group has folks who do that kind of community learning and conversation all the time. And but that could move alongside the quite technical study that we've been talking about.
Yeah, so I'll share with you the details that I know. So the DEC program for that funds wastewater studies and is a precursor or a prequel, if you like, to then being shortlisted for reduced reduced interest on the repayment program for the loan that the community takes out for the infrastructure is a rolling program. It doesn't have it doesn't have an application season. It just continually rolls with one really important asterisk. In any 1 year in Vermont, there's generally an oversubscription, if you like, so more communities interested in participating in that program than there are funds available to support it. And urgency varies. So if a different community was having a different conversation tonight, but it was around, say, job creation, and the one that comes to mind here would be, or I don't know, like a dairy plant, a processing plant that would have major implications for wastewater. And this community was being had been approached by a group of investors, and they were looking at locating a factory that was going to have huge wastewater demands, and the community needed to respond quickly. Because of the statewide benefit of, say, the creation of 50 to 100 jobs or something, that would score way higher than a community like Norwich that's small, that's got some long-term planning issues, it's a little unresolved, and so forth. So the complicated thing here that's very difficult to read, it's really like a black box, is that you apply, and then there's a kind of a dialogue or a conversation, and then only at that point do you find out that you're competing with South Burlington or Cabot, and they're actually trying to double the size of the cheese factory, in which case that may burn through all the available allocation of funds in that 1 year, or most of it, in which case all of a sudden your proposal doesn't do so good. So there are variables buried in there that are really difficult for me to give you a read on, which mostly come from the problem of it being a very small state, and it's the program that I'm talking of is always oversubscribed. That being said, yeah, if it worked perfectly, and I emailed someone tomorrow and the ball started rolling, you would probably need 3 to 4 months to put out an RFQ or an RFP, get the consultants in place, or get the state people in place, and then it's going to run for 12 months. So, I think we had this conversation in September. I know for people not involved in municipal planning decision making, this sounds like forever, but but yeah, it's a 12 to 18 month thing. In my world, that's like lightning speed. But you know, I'm still using a pre-Windows computer half the time. So, you know, there you go.
I think I saw Jeff LaBelle's hand first, and then Goodrich.
And Leah, I think also had her hand up. Yeah, I one suggestion would be for us to ask our professional staff to develop a 3 to 6 month planning process that would enable us to address the key pre-decisional points we need to determine whether or not we want to pursue a more technical study. So that would include an assessment of the pros and cons of sewer, the different, just in general sense, the different options that are available and the relative costs, both if we undertook it alone and if we added on to an existing effort such as the school's effort. Got a read of the demand for septic, particularly in the downtown area, who has systems that are failing, who would be interested in signing up, that kind of thing, and had an opportunity to get hear from the public. That would be one suggestion about how to proceed.
Okay. Leah, were you next or Jeff next? Sorry, I was looking
Leah
at that.
was next.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. To add on to that, I think this, it's a good conversation. I would like to see it continued as an agenda item. And to help with that agenda item, just to add to what Jeff LaBelle said and what was said in earlier meetings, is have some sort of, at least one place to go for information. Immediately in my head, I'm putting together like a visual, either a spreadsheet or a document where we're highlighting key topics, key questions, key needs, key dates, pros and cons, and asking members on the Planning Commission as well as the staff to enter information based on their expertise. So if it's asking our staff to front load from their end, that would be helpful, but also from our end, and then other questions, to have us have a home base for the information to help us place our thoughts or where our decision is going, and then how we can open that to speak to others as well. Additionally, if there's anything that we notice as a planning commission, just to make sure, whether you call it prerequisite or homework, make sure you've read that for the discussion that we're going to have on XYZ. I don't want to make the assumption that everyone here has read everything or knows of everything. And so if we have, this is a very important topic. And so if we have homework we need to do, let's make sure we do that. Those are my thoughts initially.
Thank you. Jeff.
Yeah, so to sort of follow up on what Rod said, when the 2005 study was issued, the question was, does the town of Norwich connect to Hartford? That's not what I've been directed to look at with respect to Marion Cross School. The question is, if Marion Cross School connects to Hartford, and it does so in the context of the businesses along the way, like Rod mentioned, job creation, there's a VEGI or community development block grant paradigm today where job creation, one job essentially provides $40,000 for infrastructure funding. Historically, it was only $20,000. My recollection is in 2005, it was $20,000. So hypothetically, let's say it's a $2.5 million project and we're looking for $1 million worth of funding. That would be 25 jobs. If we're able to get to the level of 50 to 100 jobs, that's a different issue. I think in terms of priority, because the district has gone through interaction with various state agencies, DEC, et cetera, economic development, these programs are still in place. So I think, to me, there are two issues. One is, if the district wants to pursue a viable system that includes public funding, while the town contemplates whether it wants to upsize the pipe, I think that's what I would encourage the Planning Commission to consider, and encourage the Planning Commission to encourage the Select Board to consider.
Rod, I think I saw your hand first, and then Jackie.
Yep.
Are you okay, Jackie?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to follow up on a couple of remarks. So I think the first thing, and I meant to mention this, sort of, I don't know what comes after an asterisk, but maybe a double asterisk. So the other asterisky thing here that you as a group should be aware of, and it's sort of follow up to Brian's original question, is that for various reasons, we don't really know what the next 4 years is going to look like. There's still a few things hanging out there. Georgia is on my mind, but presume, you know, if you assume a kind of you know, one path, then rather than gridlock, you could expect there to be really substantial resources dedicated to things such as clean water and wastewater as a sort of a subset of that, and municipal infrastructure in general, particularly related to job creation. So there may be more funding opportunities, and there may be a relaxation of the kind of limits that we've been accustomed to over the last 4 to 8 years. So things might change quite dramatically. It's hard to know because we don't have any information. That's a real crystal ball kind of observation. For small communities in small states, it can be very hard to take advantage of really dramatic shifts in federal programs and funding availability. And then an associated point with that is that the EPA will be back. I think it's fair to say that for the last 4 years, we haven't really had an EPA, and we're about to get one back. That's good and bad. I think in a narrow sense, it'll be good for us overall and certainly good for our children, but it will present challenges to municipally operated wastewater systems up and down the Connecticut River, because the phosphorus count for Long Island Sound will be back on the table, and the requirement that states comply with EPA total daily load limits for that will start to press down on municipal wastewater operators. I know that Hartford actually doesn't filter it out. I know it's expensive to do. It could be at least a short-term issue in terms of making that system functional for expansion. So there's just a whole bunch of technical scenarios there that are probably worth us just keeping in the back of our mind. And those details will fill out over time. It could be good, it could be not so good, right? It's most likely to be a mixture of both. It'll be great, and then we'll find out, but there'll be a but, and the but will be very difficult for us to overcome. So there's that comment. And then just in general, I think that related to the town plan and related to the questions to do with the wastewater study, I would like to propose to the Planning Commission that you think about not just the virtues of connecting the village to the hypothetical idea that people are working with right now is that you could increase the size of the pipe. Assume hypothetically the scenario is Marion Cross works out its differences with Hartford, figures out a system, figures out a funding model, and proceeds with connecting to Hartford via a pipe down Route 5 South, which also hooks up King Arthur Flour and some other businesses along Route 5 South. The deeper question that's been off the table to some extent that's related to that area is that's the commercial industrial district in our zoning. There's limited potential for development in that area. Some of the constraints on development are related to the limited access to wastewater, the fact that there is no wastewater system. Some of it's related to wetlands and other topographical features. So if as a planning commission, you wanted to explore the consequences, both good and bad, for running a bigger pipe down Route 5 South, remember we're just talking hypothetically here, then one of the things that you would want to encounter is, what do you think the development potential or future for Route 5 South is going to be? That is historically a controversial question, but this project would bring that question back up. And I feel as obligated as a staff person supporting the commission, that whether you want to talk about it or not, you're going to end up talking about it quite a bit. And it would be probably better to address that directly through your work rather than try and set that issue aside. And I think that that can be separated from the idea of actually having a wastewater district that services the village. So it's not necessarily the case that you might settle on having a wastewater system for the village, but you might actually want to have a bigger pipe that provides more service along Route 5 South that has development potential there too. And I want to emphasize, as staff, I don't have a scenario. I don't have a picture in mind. I don't have an outcome in mind. But what I'm trying to do is present, if you like, the menu of planning problems. And by problems, I mean, planning questions that arise from thinking about this. And again, going back to Jeff LaBelle's idea, if you're going to do some kind of preliminary study over 3 to 6 months, I think that it would be good to characterize what these different areas of town are and what the consequences of moving forward with one scenario or another may be, without necessarily promising or attempting to answer that question, because I think that that's a big enough question, or a set of questions that are big enough for the broader community to want to participate in.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I think Jackie was next.
It was, I guess what's really important to me is we know the school board is involved in a process with the wastewater, and how, what role can the town play? Should the town be interested in this? How does it affect the town? How can it benefit the town if action is taken? So I really want to be able to just provide some information to the town, to the select board, so that we're in a good position to engage or not engage. I think the alternative is to do nothing, which, there's a long record of that, in our town of, do nothing in this matter, and let the school board play out whatever they're going to play out. I mean, I think that's the question in front of us. Do we try to get something done in the 3 to 6 months, like Jeff has suggested, so that we have some information at the table to decide how to engage? Or do we sit back and say, this is another time when we'll just let things play out and do nothing? That's kind of how it feels to me. And I think that's our choice.
I think Jeff Goodrich had your hand up before when Jackie was speaking. So go to Jeff.
Just quickly, I've got to move on to parent stuff. So my one point of disagreement with Rod is the EPA has not changed in the last 4 years. If anything, it's the weight of the EPA has increased. Lake Champlain is essentially driving rules. And I could talk to you about the new permitting paradigms sitting here. I think in the context of EPA, to me, a legitimate element of what Hartford is looking at is there's a term out there, CSO. It means combined sewer overflow. What it means is drainage system connected to sewer system. And when a storm event occurs, both elements bubble to the surface. And the EPA has said, you need to separate those things. And so in Wilder, where the Norwich School District may connect, there are, I think, I may be wrong, but I think there are 2 points of combined sewer overflow that the town of Hartford is required to analyze, which has nothing to do per se with the plant capacity, which is enormous relative to the requested need. So I just want to make a distinction about EPA and apologize to everyone for getting in the weeds technically. And then I got to sign off.
All right, thanks. Good night, Jeff. I think Jeff LaBelle was next.
I don't know whether it's appropriate or not to make a motion. But let me just raise it, and people can say if they think it makes sense. But I would like to propose that we direct our planning director to develop an outline for a study that is feasible within 3 to 6 months that would help to flesh out the pros and cons of a sewer system and the options and whatever other topics he thinks make sense to help us reach a decision about whether or not to proceed with a more technical study. It may or may not be possible in that time frame to get to that point, but I'd like to make as much progress as we can, and I think it would help to respond to a very specific outline about what such a study would look like. I would imagine the study would include some analysis. It would include some public input, and potentially, a survey of town residents, particularly downtown. I really want to understand whether, if we knew we had 100 groups that would sign on for septic downtown, that would make, I think, a big difference in the economics. So is that something that people want to entertain? Does it make sense? It sounds like Brian has a comment, so maybe it makes sense before I make a formal motion, but I want to just float that as a potential next step.
Okay, Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I would like to direct the motion kind of a step back from that. And rather than ask for an outline of a study, to ask for more of like a curated list of knowledge gaps, things that would be helpful in developing an application, and things that would be helpful for the select board to consider when deciding whether or not to submit an application. And that, I think that's before you figure out, what a study looks like or how you prioritize which of those knowledge gaps to fill ahead of submitting an application, right? You may have questions about that kind of like scale of financial impact that you described with town residents and businesses, but you may make the decision to move ahead with a technical study in advance of knowing those things. But surfacing those knowledge gaps would help us identify which ones we need to fill before moving forward with a technical study, and how best to do that. I think we need to get there before we say, what's a study or studies look like in the next 3 to 6 months.
Thanks, Brian. Ernie, you had your hand up? You're muted, Ernie.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I'd like that the planning commission would start acting like a planning commission and plan. I would like to see us first give Rod a little more direction than just have him tell us what to do. Why don't we try and formulate some questions for Rod first, that Rod can sort of, Brian was talking about knowledge gaps and so on, and that's valid, but that we need that assistance. But I think that instead of having the direction of where this conversation is going be done by Rod, we should be setting up the direction, and that would be the best way to do that. Is we submit a few ideas to Rod first, and I think that would be a whole lot, that would get us to the kind of planning commission that I've been talking about, that we really plan. If people aren't interested in actually doing that kind of work, I don't know why they're on the board. I think it's important that we be the ones who do the planning. And right now, what Jeff Lubell has discussed is starting on the same road of Rod does the work and we approve it or not.
Jeff Lubell.
Yeah, I'm open to Brian's approach. I don't actually think it's very different from what I was proposing. I think we need to have a clear sense of what it is that we would do over the next 3 to 6 months. And to do that, we need to understand what are the gaps that we need to fill. I was proposing that you marry that with a process that would help you address it. To me, you got to do both of them. So if you want, if you're uncomfortable with asking him to come up with a process and you just want to have a list of gaps, that's fine. I think you, though, ultimately you want to figure out what is it that we need to what do we need to answer, right? Right. And then how are we going to answer it, right? And so what you're saying, what I'm saying, it's the same thing. I would disagree with Ernie. I think we're asking the planning commission, planning director to outline some considerations that we can then think about and talk about, and having professional staff flesh out options and you know, based on all of the input is, I think, a perfectly appropriate use of professional staff and does not in any way abdicate our responsibility. In fact, it just helps us and facilitates our ability to then engage in the act of planning. So, you know, if you all are more comfortable with Brian's approach, I'm fine with that. I just want to make it really clear that, you know, once we decide what it is are the gaps that we want to fill, we have to figure out how we're going to fill them. And I think we ought to outline the options personally for both of those so we can kind of move forward.
I had one question for Rod, just in terms of his schedule. I know we're not his only group that he oversees. And so what would something like that, would that be something, a timeline that you could do, or where are you at?
Well, we will want to get rolling on the municipal planning grant early in the new year, and there'll be some that will be time consuming. The first task there is to get out an RFQ or something similar. So there's that's not an enormous amount of work, but there are sort of key dates, I guess, that will start in January and probably run through March before we really are in a situation to get a consultant to do that work. Once that's underway, we won't hear about that project for a little while because the consultant will be working on it. So it gives, I guess that gives us a kind of a sweet spot. I think that I can certainly pull together the information and be able to present, at least begin to present material probably as early as February for planning commissioners to look at. I'm hoping by February, magically, things will be a little bit more settled and we might have a better idea of what the funding environment and what other questions are that are out there. They're a little less certain now. So if I'm understanding people correctly, if I'm understanding the blend of Jeff LaBelle and Brian's approach, you'd want to see something in fairly soon that then then went live, if you like, and engaged the public, and then we got material back from them, and were able to sort of reach some preliminary conclusions in a 3 to 6 month time frame. Is that what I'm understanding, or was it shorter than that?
Brian, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so I would hope that we could have in hand some material for discussion so that we could make a kind of conditional recommendation one way or the other to the select board about whether to go ahead with an application and whether whether that's conditioned on resolving some knowledge gaps through a second separate study beforehand or not. I want to better understand those issues, and it'd be you raised the issue of you kind of the dice being loaded tonight. If we could have like a fuller consideration of what that means, what it would mean for the town if we undertook the study and decided to do nothing, what that really looks like. That helps us give advice to the select board on the kind of negative side. But on the positive side, it's like, what are we trying to, what else do we need to do that would help make that ultimate decision about whether to move forward? I just feel like we need a fuller knowledge base about the value of that kind of study to weigh against the potential cost Does that make sense?
Sure. I think I can give you, as a group, I can give you preliminary answers to those questions that Brian just outlined, probably by February. I'm a little reluctant because it's always really hard this time of year, particularly working with state agencies. It's just really slow.
Can I just weigh in? I'm confused, Brian. Are you suggesting that at the end of the 3 to 6 month process, we are in a position to then make a conditional recommendation to the select board? Or you're saying at the end of the next meeting, we'll be in that position?
If Rod, so I don't know, I don't want to prejudge that conversation, but what I'm saying is if Rod comes, this is not to say you're not prepared for tonight's meeting, you were, but if we have a more substantive and evidence-based discussion at the next meeting or at the February meeting, as Rod describes, you know, you could imagine a motion coming out of that, recommending to the select board that we move ahead with an application in parallel to other research efforts that we would seek to undertake. I don't think or maybe we say, well, one conversation about this is not good enough. We need to come back and discuss this more before we make a recommendation. I think that decision is soon, but I just don't feel like I'm in a position to say today, go for it.
So if I may, I guess I am further apart from you, Brian, than I had originally anticipated. I feel like there is a process that needs to take place before we make a decision about whether or not to do this technical process that involves understanding the pros and cons of moving forward, understanding our options, right? Broadly speaking, for town, understanding the demand for sewer in the downtown area, understanding the relative costs, big picture, right? Not necessarily with the fine tuning that you would of an exact system, understanding what the town thinks about this, and then, you know, taking that information and then making a decision about whether or not we want to move forward. So it is possible that could happen in parallel with a more technical study. I'm not saying it can't, but I'm certainly not anywhere close to being in a position myself to recommend that. I think we need to really investigate on a more kind of conceptual level about whether this is the right approach. And so I thought you were saying that that you wanted Rod to come to the next meeting to identify what are the key gaps in our knowledge in terms of what the town wants, in terms of what the issues are, that we could then use to determine, you know, how to structure a pre-decisional process that would then lead to a determination of whether or not to do that study. But it sounds like you're much further along in thinking you can, so I'm confused.
So if I may, Melissa, I agree on the value of all the things that you described. I think at some point we need to do all of that. What I'm asking for Rod on a fuller discussion about the pros and cons and the timing of the technical study is, you know, just throwing this out there. Say Rod comes back and says, if you do the study and then don't act on it, the town owes $50. You would say, just do the study because it's $50. We'll figure out the rest of the stuff in parallel. But if it's a much more substantial potential cost, then maybe there are some things that we need to know about before we say, go for it. And these are like hypothetical extremes, right? That's what I'm saying is like, how should we really conceptualize the potential costs and benefits of starting soon on the technical study? That's what I'm saying.
Okay, and I'm gonna there's a couple other hands up, Jeff, so I'm gonna let a few other people chime in. Roger, did you have your hand up?
Yes, and if I may, and I hesitate to make any contributions to the space because I need more space, but you know, I believe in conflict, and I think the problem is people have conflated conflict with abuse, and that's why we're in this really heightened situation that we were at the beginning of the meeting. But I just want to say what really, in listening to this, what I'm really struck by is that you clearly need a committee to begin to do the work of this. You spend, my observation is, and I offer this observation respectfully as just someone who's watching, is that you spent a lot of time talking about how to talk about a wastewater study rather than talking about the wastewater study, or a process to get there. And so, like what Jeff Lubell is characterizing is exactly right. And a little bit of this curated knowledge gap, as Brian is suggesting, is also exactly right. But I would say that to give that work to Rod is a familiar problem, right? Rod's going to go about, he's going to do all this work, he's going to bring to the commission, and then people will declare that that process wasn't, done in the public with the benefit of the Planning Commission's discussion and didn't involve community stakeholders of elected and appointed officials. So there really, in my mind, does really need to be a committee to work with Rod and really begin to address these questions of how do you even begin to get organized? How do you begin to understand a community's goals? And then what studies do you have available to you before you even, make that Gantt chart or that project management chart to commission a technical study? Like, where's all that work on the soil that everyone keeps alluding to? I don't know anything about the soil. Where is the thing? Where's the PDF that I can read? All of that needs to happen through a committee. Committees do the work, and then you bring it to the governing body to take an action on. So that would be my recommendation in listening to this, where you should put together a committee of your most effective, most keenly skilled communicators and join forces with other governing bodies who hopefully are also the most efficient and keenly skilled among them. And so that would be like my recommendation. And no one's talked to Hartford, so I think my final thing that I will say is you're all absolutely right, but then to put that work onto Rod, we will be back into the situation that you've spent the last 4 weeks sorting through.
Roger, sorry, we were a little sensitive because we did have a subcommittee and we had spent a great deal of time getting rid of that subcommittee, and so it's really hard for us to figure out those sorts of things on how to go forward.
Yeah, I know, and we've had the benefit of learning a lot from all of that work. I think we now know what constitutes a committee, and I would say the final thing that I'll say, if I may, Madam Chair, is that the Child Care Committee has such enthusiasm because the committee charge was very clear. The time frame was, compressed, and the committee charge had 2 questions that we are interested in, and then had 2 suggestions for how to solicit that public feedback. And so they'll off to do more, but the committee charge was very clear. And the deliverables were very clear, and the timeline was very clear. So anyway, I know my suggestion would be to form the committee, ironically.
And would your suggestion be with different public bodies, not just within the Planning Commission?
My suggestion would be, yes, there should be a select board. You can say like may include a school board member. I don't think they will bite. I don't think they're interested in septic for another 2 years because they're dealing with a 9% increase in their budget due to a global pandemic. But conservation, you can have someone from conservation do it. And then I think, some really thoughtful leaders in the community as well. So that would be my advice. And then you would have to warn the meetings, and you would go through all of the difficult emotional labor of public comment periods. But the committee is, how do you know where your community is going to go if you haven't, you need to address these questions. I would say, who are the stakeholders in this? Does King Arthur Flower want wastewater? Anyway. I digress because I know that you all have been there and actually have some answers to these questions, but maybe you need it in a Gantt chart. So I'm going to step back because I'm really violating all decorum, to use a word.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, Roger. I appreciate that. I think Ernie was next.
So let me start by saying, so that we can validate what Roger just said, but I completely agree. I think Roger just said everything that I would have wanted to say about how we should proceed. And I think the way we would do it is form a committee that under this way this time around knows about the open meeting laws, would comply, all that sort of stuff. And I also like the idea of sort of having it, I'm going to call it, and this may not be a proper technical term, but it's sort of a joint committee that definitely involves other commissions in the town too, and other boards and so on, and public. Sort of like the energy. Well, a better example is the Affordable Housing Committee.
Okay, thanks, Ernie. Jeff LaBelle.
Yeah, so I just want to be really clear about what I'm suggesting we ask Rod to do. I'm not suggesting we ask him to investigate any of these issues, but just to outline a process. So I, with respect, Roger, disagree that asking Rod to outline a process is going to get us in trouble with anybody in the public. The process would then involve in getting input from the public. So simply asking a professional staff member to try to outline a process that would help you solve a planning process seems to me exactly what professional staff ought to do. I think the bigger question about the committee is is there anybody on this planning commission that does not want to be part of this conversation in a fundamental way? So it seems to me, you have two choices. This body can be essentially, the group that focuses on exactly what you would ask a committee to do. That's one option. I'm not saying it's the only option, but it is a valid option. It would involve public participation. It would not have any issues around warnings of meetings, but it would, take a fair amount of our time as a planning commission, and we need to make a decision about whether that's what we want to do. I'm certainly not prepared at this time to make a decision about whether to appoint a committee. I think that would need to be on the agenda item for a future meeting. But I personally think that I would like to be part of that process, and I think most of us would. So I just wonder whether we shouldn't just use the planning commission as the vehicle for conducting this process, and reach out to other people, invite them to participate in our meetings, and try to get as participatory a process as possible. But I think what's hard for me in terms of figuring out next steps is I have these ideas about what I think is needed, what the knowledge gaps are. We just need someone to take the time to take a step back and flesh it out for us and write it up, and what are the considerations, and what is the information that we really need to be in a position to make this decision about whether or not to move forward with that study. And that's all I'm suggesting that we ask Rod to do, and come up with a process, and then we will talk about it and consider it. And if you all think that it makes sense for various reasons to appoint a committee, I'm open to considering it, but certainly not at this meeting.
Okay, Ernie.
I think it's okay to make the committee include every single member of the planning commission. I still think that it's a good idea that it's a broader panel than just the planning commission. The planning commission can, I don't know why it is the planning commission's job when it comes to planning around a sewer is got to do with the regulations that development regulations, conservation, all the things that the planning commission does that really involves physical land. I don't think that a sewer is normally the mechanical concept of a sewer system is really in the purview of a planning commission all by its lonesome. It would say, certain parts of the town are zoned in certain ways that would encourage needs for a sewer and that sort of thing. But we're starting to, now we're starting to talk about things that are we don't. I don't think the planning commission actually knows what people want even at this point in this town. And I think that's an important thing too. I think having this sort of a large joint sort of committee would be a good way of getting a better, broader panel of people to weigh in on it.
Okay, thanks, Ernie. I think Leah had her hand up next.
And the committee can be something we evolve into. We could, just as an idea, get through the new year, get through the inauguration, get through just a couple more months of having our regular meetings. And if the decision is that, you know what, a committee makes sense, even in a month's time, it sounds like we're heading into a direction to, as a group, determine who are the key people to be at the table. So I think that that's a decision that can be made. It doesn't have to be made today. Another thing I'd just like to add is, I recall we've done it before, which is we gave the planning commissioners a deadline by which to comment. So if, for example, if we ask Rod to help put together a document, we've asked planning commissioners, say, by this date, if you have something you want added to that tracking document, we could do that. So, or we could ask one of us to do it. I'm just saying that we have that at our fingertips to encourage involvement and put it in one document.
Ron, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I did, just really quickly. So I think this dialogue is actually really instructive, and I feel like there's a way in which I can take there's pieces of information here that are useful for me. If the commission wants, I can certainly first of all try and use the minutes as a way of framing some of the key points made in this conversation, and then I think at least outline in some kind of schematic fashion a kind of a work schedule that goes from the very simple beginning to a more elaborate endpoint that should satisfy some of the concerns that have been raised. And then I think, just to clarify really quickly, something that Ernie said, ultimately, if there was to be a wastewater system built in town, or the town had a municipal intermunicipal agreement with Hartford and had a contractual relationship with Hartford to handle wastewater from Norwich, there is a set of formal processes that are laid out in statute that Herb probably knows more about than anyone here, that empowers the select board actually to be so-called water commissioners. And so there's a whole set of statutory things that are already built out there, but we're a long way away, I guess, from making any of those kinds of decisions. And you're right, the mechanics of actually how the wastewater system works or who's going to run it and all those kinds of things are bound up in that, and they're far off. But in this phase, I think because of the really strong overlap between questions of land use and access to municipal wastewater, the Planning Commission is the body that probably has the responsibility in statute and the skills and the background to do a lot of work around the question of if we should have a wastewater system, and then if you answer affirmatively to the question, yes, we should have a wastewater system, then what is the area of that wastewater system? And then but questions of how you would pay for it and how you would structure the day-to-day operation of it are certainly questions for the select board and the wider community. But I think in the initial cut, the most obvious consequences for making a decision about a wastewater system is that it will influence land use directly, no matter how small. And so that seems to be really narrowly within the purview of the Planning Commission.
Jackie?
This has been really good discussion. Do we need a motion to wrap it up, or I'm not sure how we want to conclude, but
I was about to beg for one.
yeah, I know, but I think Rod made a good suggestion. From the minutes alone from this discussion, I think we will have some direction. Rod also suggested that from our discussion, he's envisioning, an outline of an approach that I think addresses the concerns or the suggestions that Brian and Jeff and Ernie mentioned, and could we entertain a rough draft of that document as an agenda item in January? I hate to wait till February to pick up this discussion, but you know, a rough draft of Rod's thoughts of how we could proceed, and everyone is welcome to send Rod whatever they want to send him that they think should be in that draft. But like, I'd like to have us consider it in January, whatever state it's in, so that we don't lose the train of thought and can keep moving on this question. I'm not sure that's a very succinct motion. I know it's not, but that's what I'm thinking we should do.
Are you,
Brian, can you tune that up, Brian?
Brian?
I'd like a bit more structure than that. And I have a feeling Jeff knows just what structure we need. And so
Yeah.
I like the general approach that you described, Rod and Jackie. But Jeff, if you had 2 or 3 bullet points for your high level objectives for Rod's deliverable, what would you hope is on the page? And we would leave it to him to not exactly embellish, but expand given his professional judgment.
And can you make that in the form of a motion?
I think he's just asking me, well, let me just outline what
We'll make a motion after this, but yeah.
Late.
You know, what I would like to see is a kind of a bulleted list of the key analyses that would be useful to conduct, analyses and processes that would be useful to conduct in order to make a decision about whether or not to recommend proceeding with a technical study for a sewer system. So that could include, for example, understanding the costs and benefits, understanding the costs, right, involved in a system. It could include understanding the needs for and demand for sewer in the downtown area. It could include understanding what the public thinks about this process and what their views are. So I think if we could almost, it wouldn't take that much work, right, to outline what are these key sort of analyses and steps, and just have someone think through what they are and then come up with a rough work plan of how we might address them if we were to proceed, and what would the resources that would be needed to do that, whether that could be done in-house or externally. So it's kind of a 1 to 2 page outline of a, and I think it would address, Brian, your issue about what are the knowledge gaps that we have. And I think it would also address my issue, is that I'm interested in how we might address those knowledge gaps. What would be the rough process? And then we'll have something specific to look at that would outline something that we could talk about, and that would enable us, I think, to make a decision.
So Rod, do you understand that? Do others understand that? Like, presumably that whole 13 paragraphs that Jeff just said isn't a motion, but if we made a motion to ask you, Rod, to do a deliverable around next steps on potential study, is that sufficient for your understanding, for everybody else's understanding?
I'm comfortable with the information that I've gotten, and I've made notes, and I've got the tape here. I'll I hope I get it right.
You can reach out and talk, though, Rod. You don't have to just go into a black box. I mean, certainly, I would encourage members of the Planning Commission to reach out to Rod if they have thoughts about what should be in that outline.
I think I can pull together something that looks like a cross between kind of a calendar or a time frame, and then key questions that need to be answered, and backfill some of those pretty quickly in terms of what we know is already out there. And then there'll be if you think of it like an Excel spreadsheet that kind of is both a calendar and then a to-do list, there'll be just empty cells, and then as we move forward, we'll be able to fill those in, and then people will add cells and then hopefully delete some cells too. But I think we can do something like that.
Thanks, Rod. Jackie?
I just want to underscore, anyone on the commission who feels they have thoughts that they want to be included in the draft that Rod is good enough to prepare for us, please make sure they get it to Rod. And Rod, maybe you could give us a date on that of when we need to get you our thoughts.
Well, I'd love it for Christmas, you know.
Okay, before Christmas.
It would really warm a planner's heart to have that for Christmas.
Okay, got it. Fantastic.
On the first day of Hanukkah.
Yeah,
Now, is that the Orthodox
I feel
Christmas or the
warm
Western
already.
Christian?
Yeah, which Christmas, Rod?
Oh, well, as a diehard atheist, you know, just use some date in December, okay?
Okay.
Oh,
Sounds
not
good.
required. Okay, does someone want to make a motion?
Do we need a motion? I don't know. Is this motionable or do we just?
If it's not,
I'm sorry, Melissa, you think we need a motion or not?
okay, I guess not. I'm fine without a
don't know.
motion.
You know, I feel like I've got a direction. If it makes you feel better that you got a motion to that's fine, but I don't feel a need for it.
Okay, so December 25th, get Rod stuff. You can get Rod stuff. It is 8:25 and you know, the menorah is probably burnt out by now, but Jeff, would you like to give an update on the Affordable Housing Committee?
I'll try to make this quick. So we, just a quick sense of where we are. We have undertaken a review of the land that is owned by the town or owned by the fire district. And we have kind of reviewed and considered whether one could situate housing on that land or whether one could situate septic on that land. And we still have a few outstanding questions about kind of some of the parcels that the fire district owns on Beaver Meadow Road. But those are not going to be suitable for large scale development. It would be more the kind of thing where you could put 1 or 2 units or something, duplex here, or maybe you could squeeze in like a little tiny home community or something at best, but probably not. But you know, it's but unfortunately the stuff that's close in for the most part is not suitable for development. We did identify one parcel that we thought had a lot of septic potential, but it turns out it has a set of restrictions that are associated with it that are imposed by the federal government in association with a land preservation transaction that specifically prohibit the development of septic. It did raise the question to me about whether there might be some private properties that are available along the river that might have similar potential for septic, that might be something that don't have those kinds of restrictions that one could acquire, but that would require purchase or donation of properties. So it was important to undertake. It wasn't in the end incredibly fruitful in terms of finding, you know, the bullseye. We have asked for at a future meeting to talk about some of the other governmental bodies that own property in Norwich. So, you know, the school system, the federal government, the state government, trying to get a sense of what other parcels might be. So that would hopefully be something that we can do at a subsequent meeting. So that's one thing that's happened. The second thing that's happened is that we prepared a op-ed that was published in the Valley News. So if you haven't seen it, let me know. I can send it around. We are asking for people to consider donating land or money, or just getting in touch if they have ideas. And I have not been overwhelmed by feedback from that process yet, but there's still time. I'll probably, you know, we'll reach out to the listserv just to remind them that we're interested in input and donations and stuff, not to spark a dialogue, because I don't think that's a great use of the listserv, but so that's happening. There is, we've been trying to, but haven't gotten to the item about sort of next steps on developing FAQs and more sort of information around accessory dwelling units. And that's something we have put off because we've been dealing with this review of town land. But now that we're done with that, basically, it'll be top of the agenda for the next item, next meeting. So I think, I think there's some energy. Brian and I have had some very good conversations. Brian himself and also Brian and me have had some very good conversations with the Vermont, the Upper Valley Land Trust around shared goals. And they were very supportive, I think, of trying to think about ways to sort of have preservation and affordable housing, kind of go together. And frankly, if we'd had that conversation 5 years ago, there probably were some transactions they were involved in that where we might have been helpful in finding a way to include some affordable housing as part of those. So you can't go back and change history, but it's important, I think, to build that relationship and to think about ways to achieve mutual objectives without, because that's really the way to build a foundation, is to have kind of a win-win for different folks with different, viewpoints. So that is, I think, the update. Brian, do you have anything to add?
No, that's great, Jeff.
Great, thank you. Jackie, did you have a
I
question?
just have one quick question. Is it possible to include that opinion piece in our minutes or something? I'm just looking for other ways to get that out.
Sure.
As a record of our meeting, we discussed this or whatever, bring it to people's attention, just attach it to the minutes. Yeah, okay.
Ernie?
I think that to me, that was a personal statement by 3 people. I don't think that would be appropriate to be included necessarily in the minutes, other than we discussed the thing.
Brian?
Sorry, I mean, regardless of the merits of the piece itself, if you looked at the bottom, it was endorsed by all but one member of the subcommittee. And we have plenty of correspondence included in our packets by a single person. I don't understand that, Ernie.
I think we're not saying we endorse it. We're just saying we talked about it, and so people know what we talked about.
Okay, well, thanks for that. I think because it is 8:30 and we're past our meeting time, that we will have to put the process and policies that we're going to discuss for the Planning Commission off until the next meeting. And so is there any other business that we need to talk about? Hearing none. Future meetings, and schedule and agendas. It looks like our next meeting, if I'm correct, is January 28th at 6:30.
Right.
I have other commission meetings that day too, so I always get confused.
Yeah.
Agenda items, it sounds like we want to talk about the wastewater, whatever Rod puts together.
Yep. Wastewater outline and yep.
And then the process and policies for the Planning Commission. Does anyone have anything else that they would like to see added?
What'd you say?
Right.
Bill,
The 28th, January 28th at 6:30.
Yeah.
I'll probably have a very preliminary update on the municipal planning grant.
Great.
It will be just an administrative step. It won't be anything consequential, I don't think.
Ernie, the processes thing that Melissa mentioned was on tonight's agenda that we didn't get to.
I'm sorry, say that again.
If you look at tonight's agenda, the processes thing that Melissa mentioned is something we didn't get to.
Okay. So
Yeah,
next,
so we're going to put that on for next time.
And there might be a report if we have another childcare committee meeting back to this group, but you don't have to put it on the agenda for now.
thank you.
Okay. Well, and you can always email me between then and now and then. Okay. Any other comments from the public? Thank you, public, for attending. We appreciate it.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. All in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
Melissa Horowitz, Jackie Allen, Brian Loeb, Leah Romano, Ernie, Jeff LaBelle, all in favor.
There we go. All right. Good night, guys.
All right. Hi.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.
Good job. Bye, Rod. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.